Let's make an 1860s cotton dress. Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin, and here on this channel I teach old-fashioned sewing skills, and we often copy originals. Today we're going to be making an 1860s dress because I need a nice cotton dress. I mean, the nicest one I have I did make last year, and it's still my favorite 1860s dress. So I've had this fabric in my stash for a while, and it's beautiful and I love it, and it's like one of my favorite prints. So we're going to make another one, but we're going to make this one a little bit fancier. I'm thinking a yoked bodice, I'm thinking some ruffles, I'm thinking coat sleeves, kind of make it 1863 to a little bit later, because my other one's very 1855 to like 1863. And that's what we're going to work on today. So late Civil War, just post Civil War. First thing I have to do though is wash this fabric because it has not been washed yet. Alright, real quick, what I'm going to do is make a yoked bodice, which I think we've done on the channel before, but I don't know if I actually showed you how I make the pattern. So I cut an extra of my pattern, the bodice pattern. I add 1/2 inch seam allowance right across the back. So this is the not full part. Now I have this. The trick is to match the bottom and make it fairly straight. Alright, now I can like keep this down so it won't fold on me. There we go. And we're going to keep doing that. I want it to be about 2 times the width of what it was. So that's what I'm going to do, is about every inch or so I'm going to put a piece of tape that's about 1 inch. So that's going to double what it was. Make sure that matches. There we go. Now I'm going to put strips of tape on the back side just so it's not sticky anymore. So first I'm going to do that for the front as well, which is this piece, and then I will have a pattern. Alright, now we're at the cutting portion. I'm cutting coat sleeves. Alright, I have everything cut out, so I'm ready to do the skirt. This is a plain weave cotton. It should rip straight, so we're going to rip the whole skirt panel. One skirt panel. We're going to do 3.5 skirt panels. Next up is cutting lining. I'm going to do very little lining for this project. I want it to be somewhat of a summer dress. You can also do this on non-yoke dresses. You can only just line that little strip underneath it. You can also do a completely unlined bodice, although, again, sweat barrier. So I do prefer them. I do prefer, even when I do an unlined bodice, they'll have a little bit of lining underneath the arm. But there are lots of different lining options. Don't think you just have to cut your bodice fabric and your lining fabric the same. You can pleat the fashion fabric, you can indart the lining, you can not line the whole dress at all, you can line it just right underneath the arms, about 2 inches on either side, 1.5 inches on either side, something like that. You can do a half high lining even on a full high neck. So many lining options, and I don't think people realize that when they make reproductions. Alright, using the 1870s machine because the 1860s one is A, rusted through, and B, on display at a museum, so can't use that one. This one does the exact same stitch, and it's essentially the exact same machine except for this one has a different tensioner. But yeah, this is the trim, so we're going to do lots of little pretty gathered-ish trim, and I thought it'd be really pretty detail if we did the chain stitch on both sides, because I could add a little bit of extra detail, so we're doing that. Now the trim is done, which means that when we get to the point of trimming the bodice, it'll be done. I also cut piping and I stitched it all together. I haven't actually made the piping yet, but I did stitch it together. I figure I'd get both the things that I really didn't want to do out of the way first, which was this and the piping. Well, this is the one with the front opening, so we're going to leave a little bit undone. Now we're going to put the facing on the skirt. And of course I will attach it by hand at the top, and then we're going to gauge this skirt. So I'll go ahead and turn that under, do the balancing part, and gauge it and all that. And if any of this doesn't make any sense to you, I do have a whole video that's specifically how to make a Civil War era dress, which is essentially what we're doing. So I have hand gathered the yoke parts, so the gathered bits on the bodice, and I'm going to sew them onto the plain parts of the bodice. So like here's the gathered bit and here's the top of the yoke. I got to do this to the front and the back, or the other front and then the back as well. Alright, now I am sewing the backs and fronts together at the shoulder seams and at the side seams. Now for sleeves, I've sewn the sleeves together, but I am going to make a little facing out of the same fashion fabric, and this is going to make it look like I lined the sleeves entirely as silk fabric, but in reality it's just like 3 inches. It's an appearance thing. Sewing the facing on. Sleeve trim is going to get put on, so this is, I literally just gathered it a little bit. It's like 1.5 times the size of the sleeve. And so yeah, this is the fanciest cotton dress I've ever done, because cotton dresses in the period generally have self fabric trim, and that's a lot of work to make self fabric trim because you have to like hem it, and it's not as much fun as like doing a velvet ribbon or something that's already finished, and you don't find those on cotton dresses nearly ever. And so this is a lot of work, but I'm actually kind of excited to see it done. Alright, sleeves are pinned in. I was going to sew them by machine, but I think they're going to be better by hand. I think they always fit better when they're done by hand. So this is the waistband going to get sewn on to a gathered bodice. at the neckline, and I also need to put piping at the very waistline as well. I did cut the neckline into a very slight V to keep it a little bit cooler. I was still wondering if I should have not lined the yoked part. Alright, doing some finishing work. Lost my needle. There it is. Okay. So we sewed on piping. Now I'm sewing the raw edge down so that's a nice sturdy edge so we can put our skirt on it in a minute. I also need to make undersleeves and a collar, which would be fun because I made this as a V-necked bodice, and I'm not entirely sure I've ever made a collar specifically for a V-neck. So that'll be fun to try out. A couple years ago I got really tired of constantly moving cuffs and collars and handkerchiefs from, you know, dress to dress to dress. And so I decided each dress needed to have their own of all of that, within reason. Like all my working dresses, of course, don't have collars. I use, you know, neckerchiefs, which I do need to make more of. But yeah, just within reason, everything needs to have their own. It's not necessarily a period thing. It's I don't like having to constantly move collars and cuffs and undersleeves around. So every dress gets their own. Alright, sleeves get sewn in. I sewed in piping of the sleeves with a very loose running stitch. And that is going to give me the guide by which I can sew. And I'm using a back stitch. I could do it by machine. I find that with sleeves especially, it just lays better when it's done by hand. I think it will be easier to do the collars and cuffs now before I attach it to the skirt. So we'll take a break from the pretty fabric and I'll go find some nice edging. Alright, undersleeves and collar. So for the undersleeves, I cut another coat sleeve. They're just smaller than the actual sleeves. I have 3 different sizes of coat sleeve patterns that I keep. One's small, one's medium, one's large. I use medium for the dress, so I'm using small for the undersleeves. And I am felling them to finish off the edges because undersleeves and collars they're accessories, but they're kind of in the same boat as undergarments like petticoats and chemises and drawers and night dresses because they're meant to be washed quite frequently, and so you don't want any raw edges that are going to ravel. Choosing a very nice edging. This is heirloom quality, so it's not the poly cotton stuff that you can find at Joann's. This is the good heirloom quality stuff. When you attach white work like this, you usually put a tuck at the edge where the white work meets the fabric, and that kind of hides the join that makes it look like the white work was done on the piece, and you just added tucks for extra detail when it's really you bought the white work and you're just attaching them to your piece. And I'm doing this upside backwards. Hang on. I was looking at it thinking that does not look quite right. I'm forgetting something. Yep. Now I'm using the same white work, and I have put tucks in it so it goes along the fold of the neckline. And I have videos on how to do that. I will link them, so if you need to know how to do that, you'll have that resource. Alright, so this edge will get bound, so this will get folded over and folded over again, and we'll have a nice little bound edge. For our collar, we can go ahead and attach that. Alright, let's finish this dress. The collar gets whipped in not very nicely whatsoever. And I have collars that I've pinned into dresses 4 or 5 years ago that are still pinned in. So, alright, undersleeves. And I'm actually going to tack them in all the way around. You don't have to. I've seen them tacked in plenty of times just at the top and bottom, which works really well. Personally, I find that when I put the sleeve on, then sometimes I get my hand outside of the arm side of the undersleeve, and then I have to, re-put my hand through. And the very last step, putting the skirt to the bodice. Just pulled out the gauging threads, and each individual plate gets whipped to the waistband. I do have an original skirt where every other plate, 3 plates was whipped to the waistband. So it's perfectly plausible to do that. I feel like I've made enough shortcuts in this one with only doing the one gauging thread and all that, we're going to do this part right. Plus I think the pleats lay better when they're nice and every single one of them is stitched down. Okay, I'm really excited to try this on. So I made a small hoop skirt, so it's not my giant one anymore. I keep finding pins in this thing. Every time I handle it, there's more pins. But yeah, I have on my smaller hoop because this was made to go over a smaller hoop. And I'm super excited about the fanciest cotton dress I've ever made in my life. I don't usually reserve this much effort for my cotton dresses. I save it for my silks and my wools. And there goes my hair with a hook and eye. I did have to piece the skirt slightly because I cut the trim before I cut the skirt pieces, which was my fault. And somehow I made a mistake, and it's right in the front. But I've also seen enough original dresses to know that that's not a bad thing, and that's not necessarily something they would have cared. I may have to have somebody else come and fold that down, but I don't have anyone else here right now. So my collar may be weird, and I apologize. Yay, okay. That is beautiful. Quite lovely. So I guess this is kind of sticking down in a way. I probably need to iron it down. I haven't done that. But yeah, this is beautiful fabric. With a lot of work. I don't usually put this much effort into dresses, okay? If I'm going to trim a dress, it's going to be ribbon. Yeah, ribbon, usually, because that is the easiest thing to put together. And of course their machines didn't do gathering threads back then, so all of this has to be hand gathered, which just adds to the time. And then like getting it in there and like shoving it into a machine was actually harder than it was than I thought it was going to be, because you get into some really tight and weird corners. But hey, it fits and it's actually very pretty. Alright, here it is dressed up just a little bit. So I had a belt. This is just regular belting ribbon or Petersham ribbon with a belt buckle that is from Beth Miller Hall. So it's completely, copied from an original. She makes molds of her originals and then recreates them in resin and sells them. And I have earrings from her as well. This is an original brooch. So very nice. I was kind of looking for some black earrings, but I couldn't find them. So we're going with the ivory ones. So it's long, it's beautiful. It doesn't quite touch the floor though, so it's not going to get dirty. But I think that's just about it for today. We made a beautiful dress. Fanciest cotton dress I've ever made, so I'm kind of excited about this. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click the little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.